There are few watches as legendary or as recognizable as the Cartier tank. This year, Cartier has released the very first solar-powered quartz tank watch, the Tank Solar Beat. It's a beautiful watch in terms of an expression of Cartier style and an expression of the elegance that we associate with the tank watch, but can a solar-powered quartz tank watch be a real tank? We found out during a week on the wrist. The Cartier tank is called the tank because of its imagined resemblance to a military tank seen from above, and the tank on which the Cartier tank is supposed to have been based was the Renault FT-17, which is considered by many authorities to be the first modern tank. Louis Cartier probably saw the FT-17 on the front lines during World War I, and upon his return, he developed first the Tank Normal, and then in 1922, the Tank Louis Cartier. That's the model on which the Tank Solar Beat is based. The first quartz tank watches were the Musc de Cartier tanks, which first were produced in the 1970s. While it seemed counterintuitive for Cartier to produce a quartz-powered luxury wristwatch, it was a way for the brand to reach a wider audience and for it to get its designs out into the world and onto more wrists. In 2021, Cartier re-released the Musc de Cartier watches, again some with quartz movements and with very colorful dials. Today they're simply known as the Tank Musc watches. And for the first time, a tank was released with a solar-powered quartz movement. The movement uses a photovoltaic technology to turn visible light into electricity. The only part of the dial that's transparent to light are the numerals, and Cartier went to a lot of trouble to engineer a movement that would be able to run reliably on the amount of light that could get through a dial that does not look like a solar-powered watch dial. You can get a total of 16 years autonomy out of the movement without having to change the rechargeable cell. A rechargeable battery, even the most reliable, only has a certain limited number of recharge cycles that it can go through, but 16 years is an awfully long time to have a reliable, trouble-free watch that doesn't require any service at all. While I was pretty surprised to hear that Cartier was making a solar-powered tank watch, my first impression when I took it out of the box was, well, it's a tank. During the week that I wore the Solar Beat tank, I derived a lot of the same pleasure that I get from wearing a gold Tank Louis Cartier. It has the same wonderful property of almost disappearing on the wrist when you wear it. You're not really aware that you're wearing a wristwatch at all. And if you're used to wearing heavier stainless steel sports watches on steel bracelets, the degree to which a tank can become a comfortable part of your everyday life is pretty amazing. One of the most wonderful things about the Tank Louis Cartier specifically, and probably tank watches in general, is they are really, really versatile. There's a tendency when we look at watches to put them into particular categories, to think of them as dress watches, to think of them as sports watches. But one of the interesting things about the tank, and especially true of the Solar Beat, is that it really doesn't come across as a dress watch per se. It doesn't really come across as a sports watch per se. It's simply a piece of beautiful design that kind of stands in a category of its own. One of the things that I think can happen with a less expensively priced version of a classic luxury product is it can feel like a compromise. And I worried that putting this on, I would feel as if I were wearing something that was a lesser version of the classic Tank Louis Cartier in precious metal. And you know, rather fantastically, it doesn't feel like a compromise at all. The large version of the Solar Beat tank had a price when it was launched that was announced at $2,610. Now there's two ways to look at that. The first is, wow, that's kind of a lot of money for a solar-powered quartz watch. And you know, it's certainly true that you can get solar-powered quartz watch technology for considerably less than $2,610. Another way to look at it, though, is that, first of all, you're getting an actual Cartier with everything that the name implies, with all the prestige that it implies. The second point to bear in mind is that the Solar Beat tank has a connection to a 100-year-old history of wristwatch design from one of the companies that really helped invent the modern wristwatch. It is a unique enough value proposition technically, and closely enough connected to the history of watch design at Cartier specifically, in order for it to really have a presence of its own and I think a value of its own.